Hello, everybody. I'm Christopher Nial. I'm a senior partner at Fin Partners, and I work in the Global Health Impact Group. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jürgen Wieland, who's the Development Environmental Sustainability Lead at Novartis. Jürgen is based in Basel, Switzerland, and is responsible at Novartis for sustainable product design, greener clinical trials, and employee engagement initiatives, including the My Green Lab certification. With a lifelong passion for environmental sustainability spanning 4 decades and a business background in finance and controlling, Jürgen aims to create a positive impact by focusing on win-win opportunities between business and environmental needs. Welcome, Jürgen.
Thanks so much for having me. So I would like to start with our today's topic of the business case for environmental sustainability in pharma development. And I think it's a much fitting topic to the overall theme of People and Planet United of this summit. So let's briefly start with looking into the Novartis overall environmental sustainability targets and then why we are as a company engaged on that. And to make it very simple, there is just no healthy human on a dead planet. And therefore, the Novartis mission to prolong and extend quality of life is very much linked to our sustainability aspirations. When it comes to our strategy, we are ambitious here, leading in the field with a net zero company target by 2040, aiming for carbon neutrality also across scope 1 and 2 by 2030, and having on top also ambitious climate nature targets and looking into the patient pillar, which is about sustainable product design, about greener clinical trials, so the topic of today. And again, also engaging our people within the company and then collaborating closely with our stakeholders beyond Novartis are key pillars. And when we, let's say, coming back to the initial statement, so business as usual, just continuing like we do not only in pharma, but across the globe in industry, is unfortunately a scenario where we will land pretty much at a dead planet in a couple of decades to go. So it's not a question of the grandchildren of the grandchildren, but it's a question which hits all of us as we are here on this call, definitely our kids. And therefore, I think it's a accountability we all have to contribute to be also, let's say, on the right and positive side of history, who is not deploying and destroying the planet, but actually allowing the planet and then future generations to thrive. With that, just a bit more detail on the climate and nature targets. I mentioned, the overall 2040 net zero targets. We're looking into water, waste, biodiversity, and raw material items. So if you want to go deeper into the Novartis strategy, please feel to consult our webpage, where you can find several more details and obviously also the actual reporting, how we progress. But the key topic is not the Novartis strategy, but how we can actually see a business case across multiple dimensions. So it's actually not only the pure, let's say, planetary targets and strategies which are important here, but it's actually the synergies which we see across multiple dimensions. And then I want to talk a bit later, a bit more about the significant cost-saving opportunities in R&D. But there's many more items to this, as you can see here on the slide. So it's about also strategic risk management. It's resilience of supply chains, what we see, especially nowadays with the Iranian war and the oil supply and also fertilizer and then other raw material supply interrupted. So the more you depend in your business model on freely accessible fossil fuels, resources, raw materials, the more dependent you are and easier your business model can break. So the more efficient you are, on the other hand, the less materials and then fossil fuels you need, the more resilient is your business model. There is increasing cost, not only for oil and gas, as we see today, but also for carbon offsets, for taxes, which are linked to environmental burden, the product fees for extended producer responsibility, for the waste the industries bring with their products to the markets are increasingly of concern. The waste disposal costs are increasing. So it's definitely also from these elements important cost item to consider. And then there are on the other side several governmental incentive subsidies where you can also gain by investing into renewables, into energy efficiency, into isolation of your buildings, into more resilient supply chains. Next area is the competitive advantage you can see. And then it's actually even in pharma that in some countries you have already tender weight on environmental sustainability, which is even beyond a price. So in several Nordics countries, you have up to 30% of the tender criteria is today on environmental sustainability criteria. So therefore, it's also getting here a more competitive topic. You see NHS England, you see France, you see more and more countries stepping up here and then making the sustainability credentials of your products also here an item which is decisive if you win business or lose it. You see in the end then also more, let's say, on a company level that there are supplier ratings also from the countries and then organizations like NHS England, which I mentioned, but where they are requesting, for example, supplier decarbonization roadmap for their country for specific scope 3 elements that you have to publicly not only disclose where you are today with your emissions, but also your targets and how you actually want to achieve that. So it's not only just about blunt statements and no one is interested if you have actually the ability to achieve that, but also models like EU taxonomy, corporate sustainability reporting directive, even so a bit delayed, they are asking you to disclose how you progress, how you ensure you have the required resources on board in order to meet your targets. So it's getting much more stringent. You cannot just put any green claim out there, which are unsubstantiated. So you need to have a certain maturity in order to stay here a viable business partner for many leading organizations and companies. So it's about risk mitigation also versus other peers. Novartis is, I think, one of the leading companies, but there are certainly several more of our peers heavily engaged. And I think it's good to have also here a competitive spirit here that no one wants to be left behind. And then people are really actively engaged and are still collaborating because we all understand that going together in the same direction makes it actually easier and more impactful for each of us. And then there are insurers, there are banks, there are investors who are still looking in times of some administrations who are preferring to bash any ESG items. There is still a lot of money which is invested following those criteria. So it's still important to keep up this spirit. Even so, again, it's not everywhere eventually the most directly impactful thing. And then it's about people. So it's on the one side, business partners. So in our case of pharma, it's the healthcare professionals, it's hospital staff. There is also patients, civil society, media who are asking in the end for environmental sustainability performance of the company, of our products, of the way we are dealing with them. We see strong motivation of our employees who are really requesting the company to go bold, to go fast, to really keep up with sustainability action, and then who want to also contribute here. And then it's actually also a source of motivation and efficiency when you can address those colleagues who are really passionate about contributing here to positive impacts. And then also, when it comes to talent acquisition, the younger generation who are over their lifetime even more exposed than we are in our early 50s, for example. For them, it's also a question if they want to work for your company or not, when considering if you are, again, on the good or bad side of history, or how you position yourself towards sustainability. And finally, I think where many companies were coming from is actually from disclosure requirements, taxonomy, CSRD, and things like that I've mentioned. But that should be not seen as the end result, but just as a tool, as a means, in order that you really understand what are your hotspots, what are your abilities, in order to improve your performance, and then actually focus on the tangible actions than rather on the number crunching and reporting. And finally, there is, next to the reporting, obviously all the type of technical regulation, which it's as in chemical and pharmaceutical industry, when it comes to dealing with substance of high concern, PFAS, nitrosamines, those kind of things. But also many other items which are also increasingly regulated. So if you can avoid to use such substance of very high concern from the very beginning, or you find ways to mitigate their use, at least reduce your exposure, that is actually also preventing you from later very costly and cumbersome adaptations, and reduces also your business risk. So there's multiple dimensions, many of them also closely linked to each other. And again, what we want to go deeper is now the cost-saving opportunity in R&D, which is by chance also the way, the part of the organization where I'm responsible at in Novartis. So as Chris mentioned in the intro, so sustained product design, greener clinical trials are the two key pillars which we want to look into that. And again, there are in both of the areas significant cost and process optimization opportunities. On the technical side, a bit more about also meeting regulations and customer requests. On the trial side, it's about also the waste, the process efficiency, the cost saving opportunities. And I just will go into a few examples to make that more concrete. And starting with sustainable product design, that's not invented by Novartis, but I think there are circular economy principles well known, which can be applied also in the pharmaceutical context as well as in many of the other industries. So actually you start by looking into the raw materials. So what are those? How dependent are you on these? Do you use precious metals, for example, which is in pharma sometimes the case that rhodium, palladium, and then other substances are used as a catalyst. And there are tremendous ups and downs in pricing. Sometimes, so a kilogram of rhodium was in the peak a few years ago at $950,000 a kilo. Right now, it's at 150,000. So there might be big exposures, and then as we've seen also with rare earth and other precious elements, can be also an issue if you can access that in the long run at all, depending on how geopolitics are evolving. Product design, again, a core of our organization. So applying, for example, green chemistry principles in the small molecules and oligos. There are things like packaging, device optimization, to consider end of life of a product, not as an afterthought, but when you design and choose packaging materials and devices. What we do is that we were not contributing only to develop a pharma-specific life cycle assessment standard, which was released end of last year, the so-called PASS 2090, issued by the BSI, but that in R&D we actually apply already a much simplified tool and assessment very early in the stage, where even the supply chain, the manufacturing side might not be known, but kind of as we progress in the R&D stages, we get more and more insights, and then we can also applying and using this tool and making it part of our core technical development plan. We can identify these opportunities early and address that opportunity even before the product and the production process is getting submitted, because after it's submitted and it's regulatory approved, it gets actually much more difficult later on. So it's not impossible. There are still many projects which we can also later on still optimize, especially when we know that volumes are increasing, and there is also not only business case but also an impact behind such optimizations. But the threshold is just getting higher for late stage optimizations, or the ones you do only after you launch. And then through production, it's about leaner processes, reducing your wastage, improving your yields, which are obviously all applying what is the energy source, are you using renewables, how do you recycle production waste. So all these kind of elements are part of production, but coming obviously then later also in the collection and recycling of the materials you use in process, but then also when it comes to the products you deliver to your customers, to the markets, what do you do there? Distribution, logistics, reuse, all those items I think are familiar concepts and are available for pretty much all companies to leverage and identify where you can see impactful contributions to the environmental impact, but as well as also to your bottom line. So what we do is, again, embed the sustainable by design thinking across all the modalities, which is small molecules, biologics, cell and gene therapy, radioligand therapies, oligonucleotides. So across all those modalities, from drug substance, drug product, packaging, device, we're applying these principles, identifying these opportunities, and then discuss with the teams what we can implement in order to materialize those benefits. And then to be then more concrete, on drug substance, drug product, we see those win-win opportunities in, I mentioned briefly, the catalyst load reduction and catalyst recovery, again, rhodium, palladium, but there could be obviously other catalysts which are playing here an important role, which you can also rather easily just recover from your waste stream and recycle from there. So it's even not regulatory relevant and therefore rather easy to apply. Green chemistry principles, I mentioned several opportunities to reduce the complexity of a synthesis, to consider less harmful solvents, and then keeping solvents, let's say, or avoid mixing solvents too much so that you can also recover recycling them, but looking also on water consumption, the overall CO2 impact, and again, also items like PFAS, substance of high concern, are certainly also here of high interest. In the biologics area, there are examples where we could remove chromatography steps, and in a biologics process, process intensification is allowing significant yield increase, and therefore also reducing significantly your cost and also the environmental footprint. There's wastewater concepts. You can either treat your wastewater after the process, but the closer you come into the in-process wastewater, can decontaminate it there. You can also avoid, for example, costly wastewater incineration by doing that. In the radioligand therapies, there's also ways, let's say, how you can capture, for example, the radioactive contaminated wastewater to reduce also by large multiples the volume which requires some special treatment. Device packaging optimization, we were successfully implementing already PVC-free secondary tertiary packaging across our own sites at Novartis, and working right now on PVC-free primary packaging. That's actually a pretty cumbersome process and takes several years, but there's a lot of opportunities also to remove here the PVC layer, to go either to mono, PE, PP materials, or at least avoid the PVC layer overall, which is an environmental issue when once incinerated, and actually also a criteria which several of the markets, especially in Europe, are having on their radar when also talking about tender criteria. We have seen opportunities and are increasingly deploying that, how to remove this plastic blister from needle safety devices, recycling of auto injectors. We are joining Novo Nordisk's Return program, which started in Denmark, and where they started with some other partners on board already there, and that's also increasing in terms of devices and also in terms of countries who are participating now over the coming years. RLT, so the radioligand therapy packaging, so the lead container, avoiding the radioactivity to cause any harm. So these are also examples of activities we are working on. And to conclude on the, let's say, sustained product design, I want to mention also the several opportunities on the clinical trial space, where there is also here a multitude of opportunities we have seen across all the clinical trial phases. So there are, first of all, guidances we have established and a checklist which we rolled out, which helps the team in the different parts of the organization to identify also here sustainability opportunities and contribute also here to more efficient and less resource intense processes. And so it's important to start ideally in the very beginning at the study design. So it's a question, how many patients do you actually need? What is the geographic spread? Can you eventually even go to replace a placebo control arm with a digital twin? How many visits do the patients really need to do on site in a hospital, or can you do them remotely or even skip some? Do you intend to collect some data points which are actually not really needed for the outcome of the study? So there's many things which are fundamental and are defined in this early study design. So looking with a sustainability mindset also into that to leaner the protocol is a very important first step. Then it's a question, again, can you apply decentralized trial elements, avoiding, for example, that the patient travel to some extent? With digital solutions, can you embed, which can be also certain variables or devices that, again, patients doesn't need to come to a hospital all the time, but that these devices can capture some relevant data. The visit schedule, sample collection are very important drivers for the footprint of trials. And then small things like, for example, just allowing a short time window of a couple of days between the screening of a patient and actually the start of the treatment avoids the front loading of the site with medication, which is also here, especially when you use expensive comparator drugs, also an important cost element. So you would ship in the end the medication only to the sites when you know a patient is successfully recruited, and then you are sure you have kind of fresh medication with good shelf life, and you're not supplying a site which is eventually not even recruiting a patient at all, or only after the initial batch is already expired. So you avoid a lot of cost handling and environmental impact by doing that. And then in the study startup, it's about the realistic also recruitment planning, so that again you're not producing too much drug too early and have a higher probability or risk of drug wastage. It's about which vendor you select, and then how do you define also positive incentives for them, that they are not only paid by volume and kind of the more waste they generate, the better they are paid, but also identifying here in the end the right incentives that we ideally want to reward valuable activities and then do not want to incentivize for creating waste. Front loading, I've mentioned the IRT parameter settings and from the medication shipments. We'll have a look on the next slide. And then again, also things like trial-related travel for investigator meetings, for example, how much flights are used, or can you at least, if let's say face-to-face on-site meeting is needed, can you identify what is the location which is optimized in terms of flight duration, distance, and also cost. So also those goes hand in hand. And then in the study conduct, there are multiple areas. Again, can you establish from the very beginning a risk-based monitoring so that you are carefully judging which sites, which studies are actually requiring all these visits, and then where you can actually skip visits at all. And when you need those visits, how can you actually do that on a virtual way, which is more time efficient, not only for the monitor, but actually also for the site, and focus the on-site visits to only the high risk or very complex study protocols, which require a closer follow-up. And then the waste of clinical samples and also the IMPs, or the investigational medical product, can be certainly improved by better aligning demand and supply. We see in some trials, with some activities, that there are actually multiples of kits provided to the sites, multiples of the drug products produced compared to what is actually really used up by patients in the trial. So there's certainly very, or let's say, improvement opportunities at large scale by really using also digital platforms to have a better transparency here, and then being better aligned between the demand you are projecting and the supply you need to provide in order to meet that. Reusable cheaper boxes, will come to that in a minute. Travel-related emissions I mentioned, and then also kind of when it comes then to the study closeout, so the clinical sample kits, which were in excess delivered to sites, can be at least donated for NGO or training purpose, for example. We have seen sites which have from laptops to exercise bikes to ultrasound machines, many of those items delivered to sites, and sometimes people were not thinking upfront what should actually happen with them. And it's a pity if you have a 2-year long study, you have bought, 10 ultrasound machines, each 100,000, and after the 2 years you need to incinerate or destroy that machine because you did not think about upfront what to do with them afterwards. And then actually everything which is under the waste management at the sites in the depots is also here mutual beneficial. So there you see also here a huge number of opportunities, and then we were happy in the end to get also then the management buy-in of associates to really address eventually not each and everything you see here on the slide, but a large majority of items which were actually contributing also to significant cost savings here. And just to pick the 2 examples I highlighted in the earlier slide. So when we started actually 5, 6, 7 years ago to look into the medication shipments, it was actually driven by the question from an employee, which was, what's actually the carbon footprint of our medication site shipments? And then we realized we had absolute no clue how many shipments we're even doing across the trial portfolio. And then by digging into that, we were partnering with our logistic service providers, got the insights, and then realized, hey, we were sometimes delivering a hospital for the same study eventually up to 3 times a week, even when the study is fully recruited and you have a very clear forecast about the drug which is needed there. So you could easily ship once a quarter rather than 3 times a week. And that is something which was first leveraged through, let's say, manual interventions in this IRT, so the interactive response technology system, which is actually defining the frequency and volume of medication which is shipped to sites. So with the initial manual corrections, you see already from 2019 to 2021, first significant improvements, and then we were more systematically deploying also these algorithms, what some of the IRT providers are offering, so to build that really into the study design from the very beginning, which is reduces then workload for teams and is in the end then able to identify and implement even more opportunities. And then you can see that just over those accumulated 5-6 year period from 2020 to 25, it's almost 250,000 medication shipments which we were able to avoid, representing roughly 50 million of cost savings in this period, and more than 10,000 tons of CO2, which means you would need to plant more than 40,000 trees and grow them over 40 years in order to compensate for those emissions. So massive improvement here. And on the other hand, the reusable shipping boxes are something where, especially for the cool chain, single-use boxes with cool packs, styrofoam, and then everything was kind of standard. And then we started also here in the same period, 2019-20, to first run some pilots in some geographies with some of our supply partners or logistic partners. And then we're also scaling that up over the last couple of years. And also here, accumulated, we were able then to address 130,000 shipments, running them with those reusable shipper boxes rather than single use, which is another 6.5 million cost avoidance over those years. And despite it requires in the end the return shipment, still 7,500 tons of CO2 savings. So also here, massive positive opportunity. And then you could talk about again the monitoring visits. The sample shipments are actually multiples in terms of numbers when it compares to the medication shipment. So also here we have seen now over the last years very significant contributions, and therefore we can really establish sustainability as something which is not driven because of external reputational requirements, and is therefore to some extent also dependent on that. But when you see these win-win opportunities, just get a no-brainer. You really want that for also your own business efficiency. And therefore, it's something where colleagues and associates are passionate and then willing to contribute. You see that the positive planetary impact we can have. And then we're also joining forces with many of our peers, with central labs, with CROs, in order to scale up such initiatives and make that more widely available, so that as a sector we can even have larger impacts than you can see here on the slide, which is on the example of Novartis only. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope there is still a bit of time for a Q&A.
Thank you, Jürgen. Yeah, we actually do have a few questions if you have the time. So Sophie asks, how could you free up existing resources for environment and sustainability?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think here we had actually a quite nice approach. I would say introduced already back in 2021. When we saw from the last example I was just showing on the medication shipment reduction, that there was an immediate strong business case. So we were able to introduce at Novartis Development what we call the self-funding model, that we said, okay, whenever we run a sustainability initiative, which as a nice side effect actually contributes also to cost saving for the organization, then up to 50% of those financial saving get ring-fenced and directly allocated into my environment sustainability budget. And with that, I was actually able then from day one onwards in my role as development sustainability lead, so the position created in January 21, to have something like 15 FTEs, headcounts available, several millions of budget, where we could really unlock a lot of willingness in the organization to contribute here. And by demonstrating, again, this positive business case, and by demonstrating the business win-win, it was so much easier in the end than to get also the finance and then management support to allocate a portion of those savings, which we were actually delivering by ourselves. So that's actually something which is not the cost item you want to reduce in terms of sustainability, but something where you want to invest, because you see there is a return. You can actually grow this positive impact the more you invest into that. And that, I think, changed also a bit the narrative that sustainability is considered as more complex, more costly, more cumbersome. So we want to make it easy, cheap, or cheaper and sustainable, and therefore also something which can thrive.
Interesting. Johannes asks, how do you engage employees in environmental projects?
Okay. No, also thanks for that question. I mean, there's multiple ways. I mean, we have in Novartis since many, many years, so-called employee resource groups, which are kind of green teams where people are voluntarily contributing. Could be initiatives like removing plastics out of the canteens or kitchen areas, up to collection waste in the neighborhood, things like that. But what we try in the end is, first of all, by raising awareness, what's the sustainability impact of the different parts of the organization, in the end, inspiring them to contribute. And then some are still voluntarily contributing, let's say, on top of their role into some projects. Some others are getting more and more excited the more they contribute. And here we were actually happy to have many colleagues which got either a project assignment or a part-time assignment to really contribute here, because again, also in the discussion with their manager in their individual line function, they were able to demonstrate the positive impact for the organization overall. So therefore, it was naturally growing. So it didn't come as a top-down mandate. So you have to deliver that, you get these resources, but we really were able to create, let's say, bottom up, first by running some pilots and then growing from there. We were able to demonstrate the positive impact of our projects, and then also demonstrating by putting more resources behind those projects, you can increase the scale and magnitude on impact you can reach. And therefore, we were able then to free up also internal resources and obviously also a bit of budget in order to run those initiatives and engage many of the associates in the organization.
Great. And then just one last question. Stephen asks, how can organizations become involved in these initiatives?
Good, and thanks for the question, Stevens, and I hope this is inspiring yourself also a bit to contribute here. And again, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. There are already many established consortia and groups working on that in a really collaborative and pre-competitive spirit. So on a CEO level, there's, for example, the Sustainable Markets Initiative founded by King Charles several years ago. There's a health system task force under the lead of the AstraZeneca CEO, where, let's say, really big pharma CEOs are coming regularly together to discuss sustainability aspects. And then there are other partner organizations like, for example, the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, where many pharma CEOs, suppliers are actually collaborating, where also pharma or big pharma companies were defining together kind of what are our joint expectations from our joint suppliers. So to ensure also they are not getting overwhelmed by every company asking for something else in a different timeline, but also here trying to have a clear voice towards our joint supplier base, bringing them on board. So PSCI is also offering some trainings and then some work streams where people can contribute. And then there are other things like Pharmaceutical Environmental Group, which is very active. Actually, the organization which was driving also the creation of this Pharma LCA standard over the last years, and is now working on offering a freely available Pharma LCA tool, which should be deployed later this year. But they are working also on solvents, on water, on many items in various work streams where people can contribute. And towards a clinical trial, there's things like the Sustainable Healthcare Coalition, where we're also actively contributing since many years, where it started also as a what's called the Industry Low Carbon Clinical Trial work stream, which was eventually a bit more closed door, where, let's say, 8 to 10 companies were joining forces working on that. But also here over the last year, especially, there was a so-called community of practice created, which is open to also academia, to smaller and mid-sized pharma peers, to central labs, to CEOs, to everyone who is working in this field, and then who can also join here. those work streams and then benefit then from best practice sharing and also kind of exploring together ideas how we can make things work. So there's multiple opportunities. There are IHI projects with co-funding from European Union. There are things like Bioforum and others who have sustainability work streams. So depending on where you sit, which sector, which part, there typically are several opportunities which are certainly open and happy for each one's contribution.
There's a lot going on. So thank you for your presentation. It was fascinating, Jürgen. Thank you so much. And I want to know, it's very reassuring that Novartis is making these steps to change the entire life cycle of pharmaceutical products at such a granular level. I'd wondered what could happen to auto injectors. I guess they must be very difficult to recycle given the different components and material types. And in clinical trials, I'm intrigued by this idea of the digital twin. Also, very interesting that sustainability efforts also lead to significant cost savings. That must create a strong incentive to keep on going. So, on behalf of Jürgen and myself, I want to wish you all a very good day and hope you enjoy the rest of the Global Health and Purpose Summit. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, and all the best for the rest of the day.